Hi, I'm Douglas Mason, President and CEO of Rainy Mountain Royalty Corp., RMO, on the TSX Venture Exchange. Rainy Mountain Royalty Corp. Is a Canadian-based mineral exploration project generator. The company currently holds multiple property interests in Ontario with joint venture partners and is seeking further joint venture partners for other drill-ready properties in our portfolio. For more information, please visit our website at rmroyalty.com or call me at 604-922-2030.
Welcome to the Goddard Report. Comments made on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com are an expression of opinion only. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is Sheryl McCumsey, coordinator for Pesticide Free Alberta. You can find them online at pesticidefreealberta.ca. Welcome back to the show.
Hello.
We're talking about glyphosates and glyphosates, which are commonly sold as Roundup, a common weed killer. And is it finding itself into our food chain?
Oh, yeah, we know that because I guess you're meaning in our food that we're eating, consuming here in Canada. Is that your question? Exactly. Or is it residing in animals?
Are we eating it?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, we are. There was pressure from a guy in BC, actually, to get the federal government to do testing on our food, and found that a lot of our food's contaminated with glyphosate, and that some of our food products are actually above what we consider acceptable limits. In particular, that was legumes, chickpeas, and that kind of thing. And there's been other groups and associations and studies done that show this is, in breakfast cereal, it's in beer, it's even in breast milk. So yeah, it's pretty pervasive. We're using quite a bit of it, and it's a lot in a lot of our food stuff. Yeah.
Well, I can't speak for breast milk, but I do drink beer.
Uh-huh.
And, but what would that do to the development of a baby if it's getting this pesticide?
Well, there are some studies on birth defects and pesticides in particular. Glyphosate does a couple of different things, and there's a number of studies on them pointing to different health effects. Birth defects, I don't know if I could speak to that specifically. It certainly is probably impacting fertility, and it's linked to cancers. It was used as a chelating agent for cleaning broilers, which means it holds on to minerals. Basically, how you kind of swish stuff around in your coffee pot, and it takes out minerals like calcium, magnesium, zinc, iron, and so all of those minerals can be deficient in foods that are sprayed with this herbicide. It probably has a lot to do with, actually, it's linked to a fatal kidney disease that was illustrated in studies coming from Sri Lanka and El Salvador. There's a relationship between this action and how it's linked to those diseases. It's probably linked to liver disease, and that is increasing particular types of liver disease, and so on. So birth defects, well, yeah, there is in Argentina. There's a consideration that this is causing certain birth defects there. They've outlined that there. I'm not really familiar that I could kind of list particular ones, but it's also considered an endocrine disruptor, which means it's going to affect development of the fetus, fertility, risk to cancer, and so on. So it does there is quite a lot of study on it, and quite a lot of indicators that it causes a lot of different impacts. Another one that's really particularly interesting that's being talked about a lot right now is that on the patent it's registered as an antimicrobial that lists gut flora that it kills. It works basically as an antibiotic. And there's studies showing pathogenic organisms are more resistant. There's a study that came out this year that shows below acceptable limits of exposure, it disrupts gut flora. There's even a study that came out this year that shows that it disrupts the gut flora of a bee. So any animal out there that has gut flora could be impacted impacted by it this way. And also even plants. I mean, plants are dependent on certain microbes in the soil to provide certain nutrients to that plant. So it really is probably far more harmful than we ever considered. These things were not really considered when it was registered. So that's something to think about.
Do you think it should be banned until they can decide somehow that it's safe?
Well, whenever you talk about banning a pesticide, you really have to think about how farmers are going to transition away from using it. So, but we don't have support for that kind of thing, unfortunately. So really, I don't think you could ban it. I mean, it would be nice to do that, to ban it today or yesterday. But I think in order for farmers to move away from its use, you really have to have a transition and education about how to do that. It's not really going to happen, I don't think, with government, because I think there's too much dependency on chemical corporations and, like, for example, the Pest Management Regulatory Agency that assesses the science coming from industry itself to register these products. A certain amount of money in that registration process goes directly to the PMRA, which is a branch of Health Canada. Now they are really assessing what they call acceptable risk. It doesn't mean that a pesticide is what some people are saying, safe. No pesticide is safe. It's all kind of assumed there is an acceptable risk, but there's a whole bunch of holes in these assessments that people don't have any idea about. And one of them being, first of all, that there's a conflict of interest in that industry provides the science. Another one being that we don't actually assess a product. We just assess the active ingredient in that product. And with glyphosate, for example, this is the active ingredient in Roundup, and there's additives put into that product to make it work. So there's, like, for example, surfactants, which are kind of a soapy substance that reduces the surface tension on a plant so the pesticide will stick to the plant. That increases toxicity. But we do not assess the product. We assess glyphosate by itself. So we don't assess pesticide products. We assess the active ingredients. We don't assess multiple pesticides being used together, which happens a lot and often. So even lawn chemical, for example, has 3 separate herbicides in it. It has 2,4-D, dicamba, and mecoprop. We do not assess the pesticide with all 3 of those and how they might have a synergistic impact. And when we take a drug, we talk to the pharmacist. The pharmacist asks you what you're taking, and we always worry about what other drugs we might be taking and whether there might be a synergistic impact. We don't even consider this in pesticides that are used on our foods that we're exposed to on a daily basis. We don't even look at this.
Is it possible to produce 100% organic, or do we need these chemicals to make sure we have enough food?
I would say yes. We can. And some countries have done this and have decided to do this. Cuba basically did this out of necessity, that they could not afford to buy agrochemicals, and became quite successful with that. Denmark is deciding to become organic entirely in their agricultural system. Other countries are considering this. Yes, it's totally possible. You have to change your way of thinking, in that instead of thinking about killing things, you think about why they're there in the first place, for example. So, any plant will grow in conditions that are conducive to that plant. So if you have, if you've nourished the soil well with organic material and you have certain microbes in that soil, you're going to see less issues with certain diseases. You're going to have less weeds, for example. I mean, there are soil scientists who teach this. Of course, they're not making money for pesticide corporations, so they're not particularly popular. And some people have a hard time believing that's even possible. So, I mean, the soil is one thing. Another thing that it's kind of old knowledge and kind of forgotten, but it's actually works, is things like companion planting. It's like certain plants grow well with other plants, and that's because it's quite complex, and it's being studied in some universities how some plants emit certain pheromones into the environment to attract an insect that will kill a pest that might be attacking it, for example. So there is a whole lot of interesting things out there about how we can grow things organic, and it's not just like one answer fits the whole solution of this problem. But agroecology, permaculture, and organic all have systems within them that address issues. And even the farmer here locally was asking about a particular pest on potatoes, and I just went and got a book on how to address that pest. And I can't even remember the pest, but the book had all kinds of solutions, and this farmer was just ecstatic to even know that this existed. So it's all about information and sharing really good information about what we can do instead of using a pesticide.
Well, yes. I mean, how did we feed ourselves before these chemicals existed?
Yeah, and that's complex too. I mean, there's so much to say about that. I mean, a person could talk for a whole weekend about how things are changed and how much food waste we have today. So, I mean, when we talk about feeding ourselves now, if we stopped that, the food waste that we have today, right now, that in itself would feed everyone. We have a tremendous amount of food waste. And then the kinds of things that we're growing locally. I mean, people who are, promoting genetic engineering, for example, and you look at those crops that are genetically engineered, like canola, for example. Well, canola's not going to ever feed the world, really. You know, what's going to feed us? I mean, what do we eat? We're eating, fruits, vegetables. Maybe we eat dairy, meat. Maybe we eat plant proteins. Whatever it is that we're eating, canola is not feeding us. It's the small farmers that feed us. And so if we're talking about exporting and importing tremendous amounts of food, why are we not consuming food locally, which is going to be fresher? It's going to benefit your own community in multifaceted ways. This is something that I think people are becoming aware of, and you see the growth of farmers markets and so on, and the connections between the public and the farmer is becoming more and more important, because I don't feel government's doing enough to support farmers. And I'm sure the dairy farmers right now are not very happy about the trade agreement that we just had, for example. But there's many, many examples of how government's kind of failing farmers. And the public often doesn't even know that these things are going on. They're not necessarily thinking about it or have it on their radar, for example.
I know when I go to the local farmers market here, all the organic stuff, if you're not there first thing in the morning, it's gone. So there's obviously a demand for it.
Oh, yeah, there's a demand, all right. Yeah. Yeah, there's absolutely a demand. And, I mean, if you're ever in business or marketing or anything like that, not recognizing a demand, well, that's really interesting. Why are we not recognizing this? So, I mean, for example, dairy farmers are kind of threatened, perhaps with what's happening with bovine growth hormone being in American dairy, but not here, and people not knowing that and just going and buying whatever's the cheapest they can find on the shelf. Well, maybe Canadian farmers want to think about being organic, and being that market that people are looking for. It has many benefits even to farmers to consider going organic. They protect their own health from what's in their own environment when they switch to organic system. So there's so many positives in that. One of the reasons there's many reasons why it's expensive. The system is really set and geared to support conventional farming, not so much organic, and then organic producers also have to pay for certification. They have to be free of pesticides for, I think it's 3 years, I believe, before they can be certified. So the system is not really geared to a healthy one. It's geared to one that's not so healthy. Well, we need to take control of that.
We'll have more with Sheryl McCumsey right after the break.
I'm Greg Johnston, CEO of Carl Data Solutions, an industrial Internet of Things company that provides big data solutions for monitoring critical infrastructure. Carl Data offers machine learning and predictive analytics features through our cloud-based applications to deliver key asset-saving operational insights from massive amounts of data. Carl Data trades on the CSE symbol CRL and the pink symbol CDTAF. For more details on Carl Data, please visit carlsolutions.com.
Avon Resources Limited is a gold exploration company with significant projects in British Columbia, Saskatchewan, and the Yukon. Trading on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol ABN, and the pink symbol ABN-AF. Surrounded by world-class gold deposits and mines, Avon's 23,000 hectares Forest Kerr Gold Project is located in the heart of the Golden Triangle in northwestern BC. For more information, visit us at avonresources.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Sheryl McCumsey. Glyphosate feed given to cattle. You were saying that a certain farmer said that he tries to keep that out because it keeps the cows calm.
Yes, really interesting. So, I'm talking to farmers often, and I have some farmers who are very dear to my heart. And in a conversation, I was told that, this guy was talking to his butcher, and the butcher had mentioned that this feedlot operator he was asking that feedlot operator, what are you giving your cattle? They seem so calm. And the feedlot operator said, well, he made sure that there was no glyphosate in the feed. Interesting. And it's like the evidence and the science and the exposure rate and everything, it just makes sense to hear that. And then, these things are going on in the background, but they're not necessarily, publicized or exposed to the public, but they're happening in the background. People are beginning to realize this. I wouldn't want to buy from a feedlot operator, but it says a lot to say that, people are noticing that difference and then ask the question, and that's the answer they get.
Do people have a false sense of confidence in the government that if a product is sold, then it obviously must be safe?
Yes, unfortunately, having had worked at a hospital for many years, I sort of had this assumption that things were working a certain way, and the more I've looked into it, the more I realize it's absolutely not working the way I thought. So, as I've said, industry provides the science used to register products. I even have a letter from Health Canada that is it's completely contradictory to itself. And in Alberta, some people are concerned about sodium cyanide and strychnine being used to kill wolves. They don't like that, and it's quite a horrible way for a wolf to die. And some people's pets get into it and they die. So some people have written letters to Health Canada about this. And in the letter, it actually says that this isn't harmful to wildlife. And yet this is exactly what is used to kill wolves.
It's killing wildlife.
Yeah, it's used for killing wildlife, and yet it's harmless to wildlife. So, when you know this, you can go, wow, they just contradicted themselves, but, people will write letters to Health Canada and they don't get a straightforward answer, or they get a little bit intimidated by the language, not realizing, that the answers that they're looking for are really concerning when you actually find them. So, the fact, first of all, that Health Canada does not have a laboratory of its own. They collaborate with the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, who has been pretty much infiltrated by the present government in such a way that all protections are being pulled out that were there before, if there was any. And we collaborate with them, and that's even on Health Canada's webpage. You can look that up. And then industry providing the science. This is a conflict of interest that's been a serious conflict of interest in the past. And when the the federal auditor did an audit of the Pest Management Regulatory Agency, we found that a number of pesticides never even had the required science submitted before they went on the market. So when we're talking about science, and we don't even submit the required science before it goes on the market, that's like having a drug that isn't even tested before you are taking it. And the more you look into this, the more you go, well, there's something very, very wrong here. And Canadians need to know this, because it's not going to change anytime soon until there's a tremendous amount of pressure, maybe perhaps through the courts, in order to rectify this. But right now, it's not a good situation.
We'll have more with Sheryl McCumsey right after this.
Arctic Star Exploration, operated by a team of proven mine finders, is focused on diamonds in Finland and the Northwest Territories of Canada. Work programs are underway in Finland and Canada. Arctic Star trades on the TSX Venture Exchange symbol ADD, on Frankfurt symbol 82A1, and the OTCQB symbol ASDZF. Please visit our website arcticstar.ca or call us at 604-689-1799.
Don't miss out. Stay informed. Receive the HowStreet.com weekly recap with thought-provoking podcasts, radio, and articles delivered to your inbox. Sign up for the HowStreet.com weekly recap on our homepage at HowStreet.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Sheryl McCumsey. Sheryl, while you're a coordinator for Pesticide-Free Alberta, there is talk of making this a national organization. Is that a good move?
Yes, I think so, because a lot of our problems start at the federal level, and that we hear repeatedly groups across Canada who are concerned about glyphosate being sprayed in forestry and how that's impacting wildlife and perhaps the risk to fire. How we're increasing pesticide use Canada-wide by 70% in the last 8 years, for example, with no end in sight, etc. That everyone hears Health Canada registered it, therefore it's safe. Well, that's not true. That's not true at all. There's an acceptable risk, but we're also seeing that the risk is probably far higher than we ever would have dreamed of, and we have a system that's broken. So Canadians really need to start thinking about how they might want to change this, because I see a lot of people with, maybe tens of thousands of signatures on a petition, and a government that's still stalling and not doing anything about, stopping or halting or even preventing herbicide being sprayed in forests. And then actually asking the taxpayers to also pay for that herbicide, which seems outrageous to people, So the more you look, the more you go, this is a national issue. It's even an international issue, because in countries where they have made changes to protect the public by either banning this herbicide completely or, restricting its use or changing how they do things, they are bombarded constantly by aggressive marketing practices of these companies. They're very powerful. They have a lot of money to market and influence the media, for example. They do advertising. So, media outlets are dependent on advertising. And if you don't have the public well informed and you don't have a system that's working, you're going to have a very sick population, and people are getting sicker. A lot of Canadians have gut diseases. It's really remarkable. We hear people talking about how young children at the age of 5 are developing irritable bowel disease, and that we're leading the world in this area. Nobody's really thinking about why this is happening. Not looking at the why and, looking for drugs to treat, which is really not treating the disease, it's treating the symptoms. And yet here we are. We're using so much of this herbicide that some countries are refusing our product. India, for example, our lentils have very high levels of glyphosate. They don't want our lentils. So, for farmers, this is a negative too, because, if you've got a country that's saying, hey, look, you've got so much contamination in your food system, we don't even want your stuff anymore. I wonder when, as Canadians, we're going to, wake up to that. It's having negative impacts on our country in so many ways.
Do you think food chains like A&W are going in the right direction when they say we don't buy food that has all these chemicals in it?
Well,
are those ads deceptive?
I think this is an example of pressure from consumers. I mean, people will say, consumers are not educated, et cetera. Well, we're kind of kept in the dark a lot of the time, but when we become educated and we start putting pressure, things change. So, I mean, historically, baby food had salt in it, and people said, no more, right? So, there is a lot of marketing that goes on, that sometimes still doesn't really, I still wouldn't go to A&W and have anything there myself. Personally, from what I know, I just don't go to those places anymore, and I know that my health is really good. and I know why. But I think the more pressure that comes from people saying we don't want this stuff in our food and it's not necessary, and a lot of times it just has to do with a marginal increase of profit for someone, then it changes. And it is changing. I mean, the organic market is growing. You see, people talk about grass-fed, and then I see, an agricultural, person from government saying, hey, don't worry, corn is a grass. Well, what this tells me is that the consumer needs to ask lots of questions all the time, hard questions. Okay, so your cattle is grass-fed. What are you feeding your cattle in the wintertime? I want to know exactly what you're feeding your cattle, for example. Otherwise, are you being ripped off, or are you paying for something that's better? So it's like there's many things to be querying when it comes to giving growth hormones to cattle to enhance their growth, so that you have an animal that's growing faster, and people don't want that. Well, then you really want to know what else the farmer might be using to enhance growth that he kind of failed to mention, right? Maybe not. So we need to ask lots of questions. So if somebody's marketing something to you, are you really getting what you paid for, or are you just being told something that sounds better, but maybe it's not really that much better? I do believe that organic is what we have that's really the best right now, and I've heard people say that organic farmers use more pesticides, and I'm like, what are they basing that information on? Where is their data that shows organic farmers are using more pesticides? There's no such thing going on. But people will say things like that because they don't want you to twig on to the fact that some of these things might be harmful to your health. So yes, I do think that that companies that are trying to make changes, that's a positive, but it's not enough if we're not asking enough questions about what we're really getting, what we think we're paying for.
And because politicians are elected, if you let them know it's a major concern for you, at some stage they have to pay attention to you, you would think.
Yes. Well, that's interesting too, because in Canada, we do not have labeling for genetically engineered product here in Canada. 63 nations have that. There's probably been about a dozen polls that show that 80% of the population want that. But, and the NDP party put forward a bill to have labeling, and there's all kinds of ridiculous arguments against it, and it didn't go through. The Liberals and the Conservatives voted against it. So I'm wondering then, are they really listening to us, or do we need to make a louder voice? And there's a good reason to ask for that. I mean, we have, people can argue, oh, well, this is anti-science, and that's really not true. There's 750 studies that show concerns with this technology, and those studies come from genetic scientists who have said there are concerns with this technology. And why? There's things called pleiotropic effects, which are unintended consequences of putting foreign DNA to a plant genome, and you get all these unintended consequences. You can have a lack of resistance to certain diseases. You could have proteins that we've never ingested before that show up in the food that we don't even know are there, because we don't test for that. So there's concerns with this technology, and it's brushed over, and it has a lot to do with selling pesticides, because 80% of them are genetically engineered to be tolerated to be sprayed with glyphosate, for example. So most of them, that's what we have them on the market for. It works very well for the same industry that sells the seeds. They sell the pesticides to go with it. So people would want to know this. So we have hydrogenated milk, hydrogenated oil, we have homogenized milk. Well, has that stopped people from buying milk or oil? No, but it is a process of how the product is created, and so is genetic engineering. So if it's such a good technology and it's not a risk, then I wonder why the food industry and our government is not listening to what people want.
Sheryl, how can people get more information about your organization and what they can do?
Well, I'd have to say right now our website is really seriously behind, and that's partly because we're considering creating a new website site anyways. But we do have 2 Facebook pages, Pesticide Free Edmonton and Pesticide Free Alberta, and people can contact us through Facebook on the messaging system there, or they can email us at pesticidefreealberta@shaw.ca if they would like to get some information. We have lots of good data to share with the public and do presentations to the public on a regular basis. We feel this is the only way that the public will be well informed about what's going on, and I really appreciate the opportunity to share this information.
Sheryl, thanks a lot for being on the show.
Thank you.
My guest has been Sheryl McCumsey, coordinator for Pesticide Free Alberta. Their website, pesticidefreealberta.ca. You're listening to the Goddard Report on TalkDigitalNetwork.com. Find us on Twitter at TalkDigitalNet. Our YouTube channel is Talk Digital Network. Questions for the show or our guests can be sent to info@HowStreet.com. I'm Jim Goddard. Thanks for listening.
Comments made on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com are an expression of opinion only. The Goddard Report is available online and mobile at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. The Goddard Report is a production of How Street Media Incorporated.